Yeah, I think we are live. That's what.
All right. A very warm welcome and good morning to all of you who join us live on this lovely Saturday morning. I'm delighted to welcome Mr. Sandeep Kochar, who's the founder CEO of Blue Minds Consulting. Uh, Sandeep is an alum of IIM Bangalore and has more than 18 years of experience uh, in technology corporation roles. But that's not the reason why Sandeep is here with us. So Sandeep is a mind blowing storyteller. He's a social media influencer. Sandeep has more than 200 million views on his LinkedIn storytelling platform with around 620,000 followers and has written over 1,800 stories till date. Sandeep also appeared as one of the top influencers in People Harms List. Sandeep has been awarded the title of LinkedIn Top Voice India in the year 2019 for his highly influential and transformational stories on the LinkedIn platform. Sandeep has more than 30 years of storytelling experience, having lived his own beautiful make believe world since childhood. Sandeep is going to talk about how one can build a personal brand via storytelling. Sandeep, a very warm welcome to the show at JGPS at UP Jindal Global University. Very warm welcome.
Thank you, Mayank. Looking forward.
Right, Sandeep. So, I've received a lot of questions about, this particular topic. And a lot of it basically centers on the fact that why in today's, day and age, storytelling is, important for anyone.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons is that there's definitely a lot of competition, right? There's hyper competition today, and in an era of hyper competition, you need to differentiate. And one of the ways in which you could differentiate is by building a brand. And now that brand could be a brand for a company or a personal brand. But even now today, it's even becoming more important that even when you are dealing with your customers, clients, and you are playing a job, or you could be doing anything, you could be a professor in a university, but eventually how do you differentiate from the crowd, and more importantly, why should people come to you? What's that reason which should really entice them to come to you? So that, I think, so is the personal brand, and that is why it is so important, just to cut the clutter in some ways.
Right. So, I mean, I understand, Sandeep. Maybe if you can elaborate that on a bit, that for someone like you, who's an entrepreneur, has his own company, meets a lot of clients. For that person, maybe a personal brand makes a lot of sense. But for folks, let's say, who are on the corporate, who do 8 to 6 or 8 to 5 jobs, for them, does it actually make sense to make a personal brand?
So many years ago, I was working in my first few jobs. I mean, this was many years ago. So there, I used to notice there was this person in our team who everybody would go to when they had a problem. He was a techie, and he had a solution to most problems for
Okay.
people and for customers and clients. And everybody would go to him, and customers would like him, and so would the team, because he could solve all those technical problems. And over time, he became the go-to person. Now as I reflect back on that incident, and I used to always wonder that why is it that people go to him. So one part of it was he was really good at his job, but the second part of it was also that he had built that credibility and trust with people, with his actions as well. So I think that is extremely important, that if you want to be noticed and if you want to be somebody who is preferred, that personal brand is extremely important. Now, there is another interesting aspect of personal brand. I think maybe around 10-15 years ago, it was very simply that, if you've done some piece of work, you talk more about it. And then, people used to think that they could build a personal brand. So there was this whole aspect around make it to fake it, or rather fake it to make it. And if you look at it either ways, whichever ways you want to look at that statement, I think one of the things that that has changed now is that earlier people could say stuff and get away with it. But now in today's world where you are under a microscope, you are being seen, through different angles, different lens, you just can't. So I'll give you another interesting example. When we do leadership hiring, for one of our, businesses, we kind of look at the social media profiling of the person. So we could get into the person's Facebook account. We try to make a persona out of it. We get into his Twitter or her Twitter account, and we try to see, okay, what is this person really doing on a day-to-day basis? What content does he create, engage, or what content does she read? And then overall, we try to see, is the person authentic? Is the person saying do what he or she is doing, and is the person doing what he or she is saying? That to me is the personal brand. When you are able to say something and you are able to do it, and a lot of people talk about it, but not many people actually, even today's world, are able to do what they say and say what they do. And it is difficult, because if you say that, I'm going to respond to everybody on a social media platform, it is tough, especially if you have a lot of interactions happening. But if you're able to walk the talk, that is very, very important. And that to me is a personal brand. So whatever you stand for, whatever you want to portray to the world, if you can walk the talk, so that era many years back, which was more about telling and not doing it, is over now. Now it is really about, if you cannot say what you do and do what you say, then, basically that whole, in some ways it is also, you're projecting yourself the way you are. And if that is, that is in some way contributing to the universe, then that really builds that brand. Now, so if the person's working in a job, he or she, if he's created that whole persona, aura, whatever you may call it, around himself or herself, that people will approach that person for that particular piece of work. Or for that matter, let's say, suppose if somebody is in trouble, and he or she, tries to reach out to people, and somebody says, hey, reach out to this person. Now that means already that whole credibility is gotten built with somebody else, and if someone else tells you or recommends you someone, you basically will go with that person. So I think for even for normal people, and even relationships, who would you go to when you're in trouble? Now that person, whoever you're going to go to, has built his personal brand and credibility. Now, whether that person wants to monetize it or not, that is a different topic altogether. But the important part is, he or she has developed a mind space, and you go to that person for that reason. And therefore, personal brand is extremely important. Relationships in business, a lot of the business comes in through word of mouth. A lot of business comes in through knowing people and people recommending you. And the same thing for jobs today. I mean, if you look at the job market today, it has completely transformed now. I mean, since last year, now we receive 10 times more CVs, and there are 10 times lesser jobs. So it's basically 100 times tougher for a person to find a job. And without networking and personal brand, you just can't, find an opportunity which is good. So I think that has become even more important, because earlier the era used to be about qualifications, where you could talk about, okay, I'm qualified, I did my masters from, I'm an IIT or an IIM, or I did this or did that. But that era is also fast diminishing and going away. Though it's not completely gone away, but it's still, in many people are wanting to see, can I get somebody who can do the work,
Right.
rather than person having some amazing credentials on a piece of paper. And I think that to me is personal brand. So it's not just that stamp that we used to have many years back, but that whole thing has changed now is it action. So basically it's not just credibility on paper, but in action, do you see that person performing what he or she is saying or doing? So I think authenticity has become, I mean, in social media, what has also happened is, it has in some ways made a lot of things very transparent. And you are able to see through people. And though, I must share with you that a lot of profiles that you see on these social media platforms, especially LinkedIn, you will find that, when you meet the person, you'll find the person is very different from, what the person you have been experiencing. And I've been quite surprised many times. Now, if suppose you meet a person, you have a visualization of that person being this person, this is the brand, this is the person. And if you meet the person and it's not in line with what you thought,
Yeah.
basically the brand's gone in an instant. The whole, all the effort that person did, so you can't create a fake brand now. It has to be, and over time people will see through it. So there's no way out really. So you have to either be the person walking on the charcoal, which is hot, or you just stand by and become the audience. So I think that is where, so the differentiation between people is also increasing. So when
Right.
you see that, some people are doing much better and some people are not, now some part of it could be attributed to luck and other stuff, but there's a lot of bit about, okay, what is a person able to achieve, and this has also been seen in the last 1 year. If you see, almost 20 million odd people lost their jobs, and a lot of people who lost their jobs, these were generalists who were essentially doing some stuff. But now I think even the era of generalists is over, and therefore it even becomes more important because brand is unique, right? And when you move from being a generalist to a specialist, you need that uniqueness to come in. So in some ways, that's what the need of the hour is, and that's what's really happening overall. So that's the way it can help. Now, for example, if you are a professor, I remember. At IIM Bangalore, we had a Professor Tirunarayan, a professor of marketing, and he retired many years back, and he continued teaching for 15 odd years. In fact, I think he was pretty much teaching even when the day before he just passed away. And now a classroom is being named after him, and we're doing. I mean, there are a lot of stuff that's happening, but the beautiful part about it is that he would bring his own videos 20 years back into the classroom
Oh, wow.
where he was recorded, and he would play that. And you would start thinking, oh my god, this is this guy who's in my class, and this is his video 15 years back. So I think that in some ways is I mean, he's basically built his personal brand, and he was brilliant. So not only was he able to build his brand, but he was able to walk the talk, and that is where he became one of the most revered professors, I think. Amazing guy. So I think that is really the differentiation that a personal brand can create, but you definitely need to walk the talk also.
Now, you talk about authenticity, Sandeep. I think, that's something which many of us, give a lot of importance to. But does that mean that, as a storyteller, because, you write a lot of stories on, especially, I follow your stories on LinkedIn as well. So uh, does that also mean that all the stories that you write, they are also authentic? Or sometimes it's just that, you make them up just to get across or put across a point?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I get a lot of people comment on my post. Sometimes I see, okay, he's just a storyteller. So I think from that point of view, so my stories that I write are all true stories. So I don't write fictitious stories. So somebody sends me a message, um, on what he or she is facing in his life, and then I write a story around it. So that's what I've been doing. And because the public interaction is so much, that I generally get a lot of stories in my inbox every day, so I don't need to create those fictitious stories. However, I do see that a lot of storytellers do create fictitious stories, and you would see that happening on various platforms as well. Now, I think there is a very thin line between fiction and fact, right? In some ways. Now,
Yeah.
how much is fact and how much is fiction? So, especially in academics, for example, you will find that it's a very clearly spelled what is the fact, right? Now, in the corporate world and in the professional world, that whole line starts to blur. And I think the challenge is always going to be, can you walk in that line, which is basically on that line between fact. So to create a personal brand, there are a couple of mistakes that we all do, and I also made some mistakes. But uh, two simple ones are whether you're overselling or underselling, and that in many ways is fact and fiction, right? In many ways, if you compare that, that's exactly what it is, where you are either trying to oversell yourself or undersell yourself. Now, underselling basically means you're not confident, and
True.
overselling means you're overconfident, or trying to oversell yourself. Now, really, if you want to build a credible brand, you need to be walking on that line. And which is why you will find that very few people are able to walk on that line. And it is so tough, because the moment you go just a little bit, you will receive a lot of stuff happening when people say, hey, this doesn't seem to be logical or reasonable. And if you undersell, then people are not going to notice you. So I think it's that, I mean, when you're flying a kite, right, you have to keep on pulling and then leaving it. That's what it is when you're trying to create a brand. You need to understand where that line is, and it's very tough to sometimes find out where that line is. And that you will only do it through practice and trying to experiment with that line and see, okay, am I stepping that line or am I not? So yeah, but I think like a lot of stories that I write, irrespective of what the content of the story is, I try to bring my personal stuff into it. So basically, it's a first person story. So if I'm talking about mistakes, then I'll basically own up on my mistakes and say, hey, I made these 3-4 mistakes. What about you? And that builds really a lot of credibility with other people, because again, people are scared to share their failures and mistakes in their lives very openly. And also, more importantly, then it spoils that perfect picture of that person. But nowadays, I think even photography has changed. Earlier it used to be those perfect pictures. It's not anymore. In fact, people are going back to black and white photography because they want to make it as natural as possible. So I think being human is very important. And if you cannot be human, then how can you be a brand? Because you are basically a human being. So and that's the essential part of a brand, that you have to be human. And I think that's where I see that there is some gap. Some people do make mistakes, and I've also made some of those mistakes.
No, that's a fair point. But the next question that comes to my mind is, there are only so many stories that you have in your lifetime, right? I mean, authentic is fine, but how do you, how many incidents there are in your life that are sort of worth quoting, or something interesting has happened, or some learning can be taken out of. So, how do you keep on writing based just on your sort of own life stories?
So I do observe a lot. Earlier, my observation skills were very poor. I've improved a bit. So I try to observe on what's happening around me. Why are people behaving the way they're behaving? And then I try to create stories around what I'm seeing. So that helps me a lot. And also, I do spend time, doing these things. So I do write for in the early hours of morning, 4-5 hours every day. I try to write, and I also try to reflect on what's happening in my life, and just seeing everything from a third person perspective. And sometimes I step into it as a first person. Sometimes I move out and see, okay, if I were in this situation, what would I do and why? And for example, we all, in corporate careers, people chase money a lot. And that's the biggest mistake you can make. I mean, the biggest blunder that a person can make is chasing money. And I made that mistake, and therefore when I see people making those mistakes, I kind of can relate to it, and I bring out that story. Now, yes, the number of incidents could be limited, but there's always the same incident could be looked at differently. One, second is, you could look at a different character and how he or she would behave in that incident. So for example, recently I wrote something around, why you should not become an entrepreneur. And then a lot of people said, this is this is not right and all of that. And then somebody commented that you should write something on why you should become an entrepreneur. And then the next day I wrote one on that as well. So every perspective has so many facets to it, right? And you could look at it differently as well. I also feel that writing is all about a flow. It's a flow state that you need to get into, where you can create something. There are days where I don't, I'm not in that flow state. So then the quality of the writing definitely goes down a little bit. And there are days it happens just instantly. So that definitely happens. But the very few days are there when I do not have anything to write. Now, the other trap is that, that write just because you have to write, or, tell a story because you have to tell a story. So I think that is a trap that we need to kind of stay wary of. But as you write more and as you kind of develop this skill, so it's a skill to be able to see everything in the form of a story. You know, so for example, we have a cleaner in our house, and this person once told me his story, and he told me how he came from, I think he came from Bangladesh, and he struggled a lot in his early years, and then he started to work at different places. So he would go early in the morning and he would clean cars in the first few hours in the morning. Then he would start to work in houses, and then by the time afternoon would come, he would start to walk dogs. and to evening, and again he comes back and does the work. So, and over time he accumulated money and he started saving money, and he recently bought a 30 lakh rupee worth of house, and he's getting false ceiling done in that house now. So I was amazed, and he's got some 10 houses he's built in a slum area where he's rented them out, and how he is doing that whole thing, and he's not even educated. So I mean, I have interest in all of this. So I definitely like to ask him that, I started asking, okay, how did you do it? What did you do? And I realized that the one thing that he does so beautifully, he never shirks from hard work. So that's one part. And he's very consistent. He's never absent from work. He has good relationships with everybody, and he makes a lot of money. He's so much money now, he doesn't need to work. And he's just a 30 something guy, but he does that. So I have interest in people, and therefore I start asking them what are they doing and why, and then I write stories on these people. So when I meet somebody interesting, then I try to say, okay, let me write a story around this person. Sometimes I'm not able to see those things, but sometimes after writing, I am able to see those things differently. So I would say writing is also about empathy and the audience. So if you are able to understand what your audience goes through every day, so for example, in corporate life, people are frustrated, and I faced that frustration for many years, bad bosses, politics. You start to understand and you start to wonder, why am I doing what I'm doing? And then when you kind of understand that part of the segment, you are able to be in touch with yourself. It becomes very easy because you just know how others are feeling. So I think stories are about emotions and feelings, and if you can get into the audience shoes and understand what do they feel, so bad bosses, for example, is something that everybody goes through. Now how do you kind of deal with it? And so some of these things that come out are very interesting. How do colleagues behave when you get promoted, right? It's interesting to see how the whole thing plays out. How do insecure people behave in presence of secure people? How do secure people behave in presence of insecure people? So I think some of these things are very interesting because they make you think, and look at the same thing differently. So that is how I try to do it, and try to step into for example, millennials. Right now, if you look at what millennials are going through, they have this very strange problem which we never had in our times, that they have just too many options, and as a result of which they're confused. Basically, and I've seen this in CVs. People do these several internships, and they'll do these marketing internships and then applying for a job in HR, or they'll do HR internship applying job in marketing. They all want to see the other side, and there's a FOMO that is there, right? The fear of missing out. So most of human behavior can be, I would say, we could look at it from the lens of fear and greed. Now, how do you look at everything from these kind of lens and see how it pans out? So that's how you can start to see the same things differently and see how and why people are doing the way they are doing. So I think observation and empathy are very important parts of storytelling, if you can understand what's really happening. Now, a lot of people do storytelling for the masses also. So there's storytelling for the masses and the storytelling for the classes. Storytelling for the classes is basically what you see as ads, right? In many ways. But nowadays you are seeing that that's also becoming, quite mass driven as well. So if you can look at and be clear on what is it that you want to do and for which audience, then you can do storytelling for that audience. And importantly, storytelling is also inspiration. If you hear a story of somebody who, for example, who was a classmate from school and he achieved something that was impossible, then you start believing that it's possible. Right. So recently I met somebody who, along with his corporate job, he climbed the Mount Everest. Now that is amazing, right? That a person can practice and for so many years and then end up climbing the Mount Everest, and yet he is doing a normal corporate job. That's very inspiring. So stories can inspire also. And then there are stories of people, normal people. And I think if you see, social media is full of viral stories of normal people. The stories that go viral are of
Absolutely.
people who are just normal, right? So delivery boy gets his first salary, he goes and clicks. I mean, you must have seen these mom's photo with him, and that goes viral. Why? Because it's his first salary. There's a lot of emotion attached to in India about first salaries and all of that. So I think storytelling is about normal people and normal things that are happening. It's not about those amazing things. I mean, not many people will be writing about stories of these billionaires who have made it big and all of that. They're more about these normal people that go viral.
That's great, Sandeep. I mean, you talk about fear, inspiration, greed. So I'm getting a lot of questions on my WhatsApp as well as YouTube. So I'm just trying to sort of make sure that I ask the ones that
Yeah.
relevant to the flow of the conversation. So I'm getting a question on is there a science behind storytelling, and can you play with the hormones in humans by telling stories? So you talk about, I think, fear and greed and inspiration.
I'll give
So
you a very
yeah,
interesting, I'll give you a very interesting example. So many years back, I used to have these dreams. I used to have these bad dreams. And then I just couldn't figure out what was the root cause of those dreams. And I would sweat in the night. So the dream used to be very interesting. It used to be that, those horrible dreams that you have, which you wake up in the middle of the night, right? And as I had more of them, I started to look at, okay, why are these happening and what could be. So I read Freud. So Freud had written a book called Interpretation of Dreams. It's a beautiful book. And from that, it led me to lucid dreaming. And lucid dreaming is basically, if you've seen Matrix, I'm sure you would have, but Matrix, basically it means that when you are in the dream state, you are actually awake as well. So you're able to quickly move back between dream and awake state instantly. Now, lucid dreaming is a power to transform people. Now, it can be used negatively also. I met somebody in UK. I'd gone to UK a few years back, and I met this gentleman who said, I can even predict which color shirt you'll be wearing when you come tomorrow. So that's the power of lucid dreaming. Now, and there are things like past life regression where you can go into your past lives and figure out why you're here also. So actually there's a lot of and lot of these things are, so for example, past life regression, there's a gentleman by the name of Dr. Brian West, and he's written a book called Many Lives Many Masters, and he does past life regression, and he's in the US. I think he's an American, and he's talking about past lives. And in our culture, in our mythology, we've been talking about past lives for so many generations, right? Now you're seeing other countries, really coming onto that and understanding that it's possible, and that's really happens. So really, I think spirituality is becoming a very integral part of human life also. Now, coming to the emotion part of it, yes, you can definitely, just like in lucid dreaming, you can suppose I dream that, okay, there is going to be a competition and I win that competition, right? Now that's a positive thing that I'm thinking. But suppose I start thinking about, okay, I'll make somebody else lose. That's the negative part of it. Now similarly, in storytelling, or you could also start to look at it from a negative point of view as well, where you could use it to your advantage. So all of these things, everything, actually, even good has bad and bad has good. So you can actually look at it from both angles. But from a storytelling point of view, it is about emotions. And if it's like a remote control that you may have in your hand. If you know the buttons to press, you could get the desired results. And really, it's an intersection of psychology, which is HR, marketing, and technology, because now everything's on social media. So the intersection of these three areas, HR, marketing, and technology, is what I understand as storytelling. So now, if you have human emotions in the picture, then you can, obviously, you'll know how to deal with them, and you'll also know, okay, what is the emotion that you can generate through a story, and that can inspire a person. Now, I use it for positive things, for inspiration, and how can people get up and lift up from where they are, and if they're failing, because there's a lot of stuff around success in on social media, which talks about that this is what I did and I achieved this. But there's not much about how many times the person's failed. And most of the time, what I have seen, I've met so many people, entrepreneurs and otherwise, that the people who succeed more are the ones who fail more. Now that part of it is hidden from the public, because you don't want to show that face of yours. Now, storytelling can inspire. If suppose you come to know a person failed so many times, and for example, Thomas Edison, right? You know that he did so many experiments, and because of him, we are sitting in light right now. I think storytelling can be used both ways, and a lot of people may use it to their advantage also. But really, it can inspire a lot of people. It can inspire generations. It can inspire. I mean, just imagine the story of Indians moving to different countries. They ended up in Africa and UK and all of that. any of that which where people have gone past, even partition, for example. That was one of the stories which I think India witnessed so deeply, and it impacted so many people. Right now, my grandfather went through that, and he had to he took almost a month to walk from Pakistan to Delhi, and the train that he was on, they stopped the train and they butchered everybody, and he somehow managed to run away from that. And when he came back home, he rang the doorbell, and my grandmother opened the door. She saw this frail looking person with beard, completely tattered clothes and bleeding feet. She closed the door back again, she went out, and she brought some food that was lying, and she says, take it. And he said, you didn't recognize me. So I think stories can and when I listen to that story, whenever she used to tell me that story, and they're not no more now, but that story is very powerful. At the same time, my grandfather had a driver in Pakistan, and he was a Muslim, and he'd sent his family back to India, and because he just knew that something bad is going to happen. But he stayed on because he had a house there, he had everything there, and he was doing extremely well. And then one fine day, there were these riots in Pakistan, and they started to burn all the houses of Hindus. And while his house was, somehow he got in touch with the driver. The driver came in, and he took him from the house to the station, put him on the train, and my grandfather gave him the car keys and the house keys and said, "Okay, this is yours." But more importantly, what he did for him just showed me that there's this beautiful bond between humans, which is beyond religion, beyond caste and creed, right? So I think stories are very powerful, and that can inspire generations, and both positively and negatively as well. So if you see something really bad happening, then it does make you feel not so good about it as well. And maybe somebody would listen to that story and do something about it, or it would make the person think or look at life differently.
Right. Sandeep, I'm getting a lot of questions from my students also. So this is a question from one of our MBA student, and she says, "Can storytelling be used as a skill on your CV as a MBA marketing? So can it actually be used for getting hired if you are a great storyteller as a MBA marketing? Have you seen
Absolutely. So
something like
when
that happening by a company actually hiring based on students' storytelling
Yeah,
skills?"
so interestingly, we had put up an ad, a job posting. I think it was a few months back, and we received a lot of applications, and some of the CVs came to me, and I saw one of the CVs where this person had mentioned that he gets millions of views on social media. So I was very interested to kind of see, okay, and he was a student, and definitely I was interested to see what is he doing and why is he doing so. uh, I think, for example, in marketing, if you are not able to market yourself, how can you market a brand then? Because I think the only evidence that you can show, because one part is you talk about all the brands you worked on, but the second part is you say, look, not only do I have I built brand, help build brands, but you look at my brand and you see the differentiation that it's creating. So therefore, I think it's important that you kind of take that skill and put it in your own real life and differentiate. Definitely, it's a big differentiator if somebody is, let's say, a viral. So if you're applying for a marketing job and you're a viral content creator yourself, and you have a, let's say, YouTube channel, or you write on Medium or some other platforms, and you're doing extremely well in that sense of getting views and all of that, I think it will put you ahead of the rest in terms of, even the shortlisting criteria. Somebody will look at your CV and say, hey, this is better. Now, the other thing is hyper competition has given rise to that as well. Because now, what is it that you are differentiating? Um, and for brand, I've coined a very simple term, which is bring a new dimension, which I think is what differentiates people from others. So, can you bring something new which nobody else has thought about, or which differentiates you? And therefore, if you can, then you will obviously get differentiated even in the job market. In fact, it's becoming more and more important now that you have a brand to differentiate yourself from others.
Now, this is a question from one of our PhD students, and he asked that how can you change an image that's already been built? So, how can a person alter or change the already built image?
Yeah, I kind of understand where he's coming from, because I think for PhD students, one other challenge is also that once you've done it, you say that you're a master in the subject. So how do you kind of I mean, one could be that way. The other could be that if in your personal life or professional life, or even for that matter, your guide thinks something about you, and that's how it is. So I think it definitely takes a lot of effort to be able to change an image, because once people make an image, they don't change it easily unless proven otherwise. So if somebody's got a good image about someone, you won't change it very easily. And we've seen it with politicians. We've seen it with actors. You can see so many examples of that. Now, to change the image, you will have to change yourself, and that is very tough. So, my last CEO used to tell me that perception is reality. So, if they have a perception of you, it is because you have given some vibes about yourself, and therefore, I think one has to change that. For that, you need to change yourself. So, you have to change some parts of you, and bring out the new you. If you can, you can change your brand. If you can't, then it's tough, because it's not something that I'll go and convince you that, look, I've changed now. We should be able to see it in practice. If you see the person making a difference, changing himself, you'll notice it very quickly.
So, how would you recommend, Sandeep, for someone who wants to build this skill? Uh, so, how do you actually start writing stories? Now, of course, you are at a complete pro level, but somebody who's not written it before, they want to would like to start doing it. How do they actually start?
So there are different ways of storytelling. Now, we talked about observation skills, we could talk about empathy, but the most important skill in writing, for example, is clarity of thought. If you're not able to cut the clutter, I mean, if you have 20 things in front of you, which is that one thing you need to pick? The other trap that is there in writing is that when we have too much of thoughts in our head, you need to empty them. And the easiest way to empty your thoughts is when you actually write them down on a piece of paper. So there's this activity that I suggest to everybody, which you could do, anybody could do, for a period of 7 days, and that to me is a micro life. Because if you start from let's say a Sunday and go to the next Sunday, and for those 7 days, if you can write down every single thought that comes to you. Now that's very difficult, because you'll have millions of thoughts coming in your head. Maybe you could start with negative thoughts. That's also very difficult, because most thoughts are negative. There are very few positive thoughts. So if you can start writing those thoughts down, then you'll empty what is there in the head. Now, there is a consumption mindset and there's a creator mindset. Now, most human beings, most professionals are mostly consuming. We consume content, we consume books, we consume conversations, we consume thoughts. Now, creator mindset is very different, where you're creating something, which basically means that you are in a space which is, you're not biased by your thoughts. The thoughts are not making you write down something. There is a difference between the soul and the mind. The soul is the energy force that makes you alive, and the mind is an organ which just generates random thoughts. And most of the time, we're not able to differentiate that the soul and the mind are different. And a lot of us start believing that that the mind is what we are and who we are, and therefore whatever is going on here is what we are thinking. So the mind, has this beautiful way of fooling us, and we all get fooled with it. So if you want to connect to the source, you need to obviously go inside. Now, a brand also has two parts. There's an inside out dimension and there's an outside in dimension. The inside out is basically that you have to change from inside, right? When you change from inside, that is when your outside will change. Means you start portraying somebody else outside and thinking that it will change inside. Now that doesn't happen sometimes. It doesn't translate sometimes. So I would say that you've got to look at both these dimensions, and you have to start to somewhere empty your head, get into the creator mindset, where you're in the flow, where you're spontaneous, we're connected to the source. Now it's like this: if you're a dumb desktop not connected to the cloud, then obviously you don't have much of creation abilities. I mean, your computing power is, let's say, limited, your memory is limited, your information is limited. So somewhere we need to spend time with ourselves. And if you can do that on a regular basis, especially get up in the morning, write for some time, that's one part of it. Now, storytelling can also be in other forms. It's not necessary it has to be from a writer perspective. Like, I'm a writer who writes and I create stories, but somebody could do video stories, somebody could do audio stories, somebody could also do stories through images. Instagram is a very good example. Now, for all of that, again, you need to have that time and you have to try that thing out more and more, create that. And but I still feel everything requires time with yourself, because if you have something unique about you, if you can get that out, that will help you create a good story for yourself or story for others.
Uh, Another question for you, Sandeep. So, which is the best platform to write stories, career-wise?
See, it used to be LinkedIn, but for a beginner now, I would not recommend, because there are millions of storytellers already there. I think now, but there's no other platform really which is better than that. Quora used to be a platform, but that was not career, it's for personal. But again, all these platforms are following the same path, right? They're all introducing videos in them and all of that, and other stuff as well. So as of now, I would say LinkedIn, but it's very tough now for anybody to come in and become a storyteller on LinkedIn. When I started 4 years back, there were very few storytellers on LinkedIn, and it was much easier. Now the competition is a lot, and also LinkedIn has changed its algorithm as well, which basically means you will get much lesser views. So it is tough. It is tough and it's hard work. And it will come after you write a few hundred pieces of content. Then only you start to develop. A lot of people think that, okay, if I write my first piece of content, that is, that's it. So generally it will take you at least 100 pieces of content to be able to come to a basic level, and then you slowly start to improve over time. And yes, you need to keep experimenting with yourself and your methods, so that can you try something different, and how will that be received and what will happen with that. So both of that is important, but more importantly, that uniqueness is more important when you want to get something unique out. So connection with self is very important. Psychology does play a very important role, and I did spend a few years studying psychology, because I was not able to understand people and human behavior, and that was also because I couldn't understand myself well enough. I think the key is really, can you understand yourself? What's happened inside you? What triggers do you have? Why do you behave the way you behave? Then you will start to understand how people and what happens within people. Then when you create those stories, they're going to be more realistic, and the people will connect with them.
I also noticed, Sandeep, I follow your stories on LinkedIn, and failure seems to be a big sort of theme in whatever you write. You wear it as a proud badge, use it in multiple stories that you write on different platforms. So, is that something you find that the audience get attached to fairly easily? Because when you write on failure, it's just that people tend to sort of appreciate it more, and it's not easy for people to open up and to write about their failures. So what really happens when you write about failure? What do you think is happening with the audience, and how do they get attached to the story?
So very, very good question. Actually, I started writing when I was coming out from a tough period of couple of years when things were not working out. That is when I started writing, and I thought, okay, let me just start doing what I like to do. And only thing I really liked for many years, and I've been writing, as a casual writer for myself, as a writer for myself. So I thought, okay, let me just write on a public platform, or start writing. So I thought that maybe the best way to write was just being authentic and sharing whatever my journey has been. And that period was a tough period, and then I started to kind of just share those, and that did very well. So I realized that a lot of people do go through all of this, and there's no way, and everybody is looking for the light at the end of the tunnel. It's a strange thing that, and now when I coach a lot of people, I've realized that even the CEO himself is in deep struggle. He has his own struggles, and even a fresher has his or her own struggle. So a person who's overpaid also has his struggles. A person who's underpaid also has his struggles. So I think everybody is carrying some burden or the other, either personal or professional, and which is why we are born. The reason why we are born is to learn some life lessons. And a lot of people don't understand this, but we are born here to come here to learn a few lessons. Now, if we can figure out what those lessons are, our life's done. Now, in this whole process, so we experience failure even more, because when you're trying to break the wall's not going to break down easily, right? And then you try different ways of doing it, and then you maybe slowly start to give up till you find somebody did the same method and he was able to break through the wall. Then you get some hope it's possible. And I think that is where it is now. Yes, failure has become a it's over talked, oversold, overhyped also, and so is success. So really I think there's a balance that needs to be there, right, between the two. But yeah, um, I think people relate to it when I share something. So not just the part that okay, I had failures and I've become successful now, but more importantly, if I'm making a mistake or I made a bad mistake, can I publicly talk about it? For me, I also evolve as a person when I do that, because it's very tough, because when you put that yourself out there, it is a transformation that's happening inside you, where it's self acceptance that okay, I have failed, right? And we as human beings, our ego prevents us from doing that. And therefore, if you can just put that out there, it is very tough, but it transforms you. And you'll be surprised that in the last 4 years that I've been writing, I have completely transformed as a person, because I am now able to openly talk about where I go wrong. That makes me more authentic, more open, more transparent. I'm able to confront people much more, on areas, and there's some character building that's happening. Character building happens when you go through adversity. Character building happens also when you are able to put yourself out on the table and say, I'm willing to learn. So I think those aspects will happen only when you are able to accept the good and the bad both, and you can put them out there. So I generally don't talk too much about the good things, because the good things people will in either case find out. It's a tough things in one's life that one battles through, right? A lot of people go through, for example, clinical depression, and I've gone through it a few times, and I realize we don't talk about it. There's no way people come to know about it, and we hide it even from our family members. And it's horrible, and clinical depression is a disease, and there is no way out. You basically are in a swamp and you can't come out of it. So only if people will talk about these things, then only it will become known to other people that it's normal. Everybody goes through a midlife crisis. It's normal. And midlife crisis now is quarter life crisis. It's normal. At 25, I'm seeing millennials having, a quarter life crisis now, that, they have lost hope, they've lost faith, they don't know where they're headed, because while they were growing up, they were told that everything's possible. And now they're beginning to see it's not. So it was a farce. So I think somewhere, I think reality is important for everybody, and failure is reality. I think most of us don't have a success rate of more than 1%. I mean, I'll be lying that if I say that okay, I have a great success rate and all of that. It's not there. So I think being able to be, I would say, look at yourself both from a third person's lens and say, okay, this is where the person went right or wrong. And I think that makes it very real and authentic also, and helps you connect with people. And now people could definitely misuse this. It's the same lucid dreaming thing, that if I know I can create a reality which will be disadvantageous to you, similarly people can misuse this by selling more of this and getting hyped on social media. And that's what's happening also. We see that happening. A lot of storytellers and on platforms are doing that. But I think that's what the universe is here for. If you're going to plunder earth, then you will get the virus.
Absolutely. No, so, I totally agree that, a lot of us, people, especially in the corporate with, high stress jobs, and there is, mild or severe cases of, clinical depression. And it's, it comes with a lot of stigma attached to it. So, obviously, especially in our society, it's not cool, to, discuss those things. And it's important to discuss those things. So how do you think storytelling on a public platform, because, I've read quite a few stories of yours, and you talk about your phase when you went through that clinical depression. So how do you think sharing it on a public platform, actually helps you, come out of it?
See, I think I share it not from my point of view, but more from a point of view of the other person becoming okay with it. Yes, initially when I started doing these stories, it was more for me being comfortable with my own imperfections, and I used to run away from them. So hopefully, now I have become a little open about talking about my imperfections, and it is not easy even today. But I think from my audience perspective, I feel that if somebody sees that, hey, look, it's normal to have this, and there is a way out. It's not that, I mean, everything has a solution in this world. Every single thing has a solution in this world. So if there is a way out, and if I can find a way out, then it will give hope to somebody, and he or she may make that move in that direction. Otherwise, somebody may just continue. So for example, the first time I had clinical depression, I just moved away from one city to the other, because it was more the context that was really getting me into that. And when I changed the context, it changed everything. So running away from the situation is what I did, and that worked beautifully. Because then, when you kind of go away and it's a new situation, it may change everything inside you. Right? The other thing is also that, one other way is that you take the flight. So that this is the flight. This is what I did, was I took a flight. And interestingly, I actually got a job in a different city. They gave me a flight ticket, and I took that flight, and I had a safe landing. But really, the other part is that, you could fight it, but you can't fight clinical depression. It's like you've closed all the windows of your room, and there are curtains drawn, and you don't want to open them, and you won't be able to open them. And sometimes it may even come to a point where the room has only four walls and it has no door and no windows. Now what will you do? You can't do anything. So in those cases, obviously, you should go to a medical practitioner and take medicines, and I've done that as well. So I think you just have to become open to the fact that this is normal, and people do suffer from it. And even a normal human being, I think clinical or mild, I mean, it's very tough to sometimes quantify and say what it is what. But everybody, I think, in their lifetimes goes through a phase when you feel horrible, when you feel losing hope, when you feel you don't know why you're here, why are you doing what you're doing. So I think as long as we know that, look, this is normal, everybody goes through it, then you know that you have hope that you'll come out of it, and that may change and maybe push you out of that.
Right. Another question from another MBA student of ours. So, the student is asking, brands seem to be using storytelling a lot these days in order to sell their products. Is it ethical for them to play with people's emotions to sell their products?
Yeah, I think that ethics is very important, and I think your student is right that people are doing it, and companies are doing it, big brands are doing it. Now, human beings also have a very short memory. So, for example, if you saw last year, many large firms, laid off thousands and thousands of people. And the strange part is those firms are hiring now again, and people are still applying. So, human beings have such a short memory, we forget. And therefore, they may play with your emotions, and then, they may do something bad, you may find out, and then again it moves on. But that's how it is. In fact, today I got a WhatsApp message. A cigarette company has recently placed an offer bid of a few $1 million to buy a pharmaceutical company. And that's what the story of the world is today. I think everything's for sale. Basically, human beings are for sale, human emotions are for sale, and so are ethics and integrity as well. Now, in this, again, I see an opportunity. If there is a brand which is ethical, has integrity, then you can differentiate from the crowd again. Because now the normal stuff which our grandfathers used to talk about, being truthful, being honest, being all of that, that is rare. It's rare to find people who are honest and truthful. And so we have this very interesting joke in our company that good people don't finish last. And that's what we are here to prove that. And so when we hire, we look at two things. We look at first the goodness of the human being, his character, his behaviors or her behaviors, and the second is if the person has the skills. Now it's very, very difficult in today's world to find both, an intersection of the two. But that's where we're trying to build our brand. So there's an opportunity there.
Right. We're pretty much at the end of the conversation. Just one last question, Sandeep, for you. The question is that in today's world, there are so many distractions. One hardly gets to connect to himself or herself. So how does one check if we are just consuming things, or building the required skill set for creativity. I mean, I think there is hardly any time for boredom nowadays. You're so hyper connected to everyone that you have no time to actually, think creatively. So, how do you do that? Because obviously, you write a lot of creative stuff.
So I think many years back, when I was working in these IT companies, we had this interesting workshops on creativity. And I used to, that time I used to wonder, and obviously later on when I got more time to think, I started even reflecting on it, that first they put you in the box and then they ask you to think out of the box. And that's the dichotomy, or what you may call it, the irony of life, right? Now creativity will come only when you connect to yourself, and therefore you should have a me time for yourself. So I generally try to have 4-5 hours to myself, only me and myself. And that is when I'm only connected to myself and spend time. So whether it's writing or music or walking or physical exercise, whatever, you need to find out that time for yourself to get out of this whole social media connections and all of that for a bit. It is definitely it is an addiction. Once you get addicted to it, then you start getting something out of it. Because if somebody likes something, and these likes, comments, and shares are basically doing well because human beings are insecure, and the likes are really helping you feel better about yourself, though they're not moving you to security. So I would say spending time with yourself is something that you need to find time, and if you do it in the first part of the day, then you have a better day. So what I do is I box my time into parts. The first half of the day is for myself, 4-5 hours. Then I do the normal stuff to do my normal day job, and then I kind of try to give back to society. So I think you need to box yourself. You don't So I try to put myself into boxes and I keep removing myself from one box to the other, and then I play that role, and then I remove my clothes, because till you don't remove the role, you will not be able to get into the other role. So when I'm a businessman, then I can't think in the other fashion. I can't become a storyteller all the time. When I'm a when I'm doing coaching, then I can't become a businessman, or for that matter, I can't be looking at, okay, how do I run after deadlines. So I think you need to kind of box yourselves, and also be willing to not become the role. This is one of the things that I fell into a trap also when I was working, that I would just become the role. And these roles are just like the clothes. You need to remove them by the end of the day, and that's when you can switch on or switch off. So I think that's very important.
No, that's excellent. So we are pretty much at the end, Sandeep. One last question before we finish this conversation. I mean, you talk about boxing yourself up, in different zones. So what's for you? What's the creativity box? Is it early in the morning, or is it late in
So
the
three,
night? Or
so 3 to 4 a.m. is the best time, they say, because you just come out from the REM sleep, and basically you are connected to the subconscious, and that's when you're connected to the source. So that's the best time to create something, even if you're doing research or whatever. And I think that is the time when you're also, in many ways, you are in the flow state, because you're not biased by anything. It's the memory has become zero in that sense, and you are fresh, and you can do. So that's definitely the best thing. I think the other thing is the ability to shut out the noises around you. I think you've got to say no and be able to kind of. So now when I write, even if somebody is playing drums, I can write. So I've written at the railway stations. I've written at airports are much quieter, but railway stations, and also ability to be able to shut out the noise, and filter that out. I think that's very important, and that you would need even at that hour, if you're not practiced well enough to be able to get those thoughts out. Though you'll be so sleepy early in the morning, you won't think much.
right. So thank you very much, Sandeep, for this conversation at Jindal Global Business School. We are delighted. I'm sure the audience must have taken a lot out. So all the people who are, trying to write stories on different platforms, I'm sure this conversation was very useful. So on that note, thank you very much, Sandeep. Thank you for having,
Thank
come
you,
to us.
Mayank, and thank you, everyone. Bye bye. Thanks.
Thank you. See ya. Take care.
Bye.